Okay. There, I think I hear something now. Very good. Well, I'm excited that you all came out this evening to this health lecture. This is a real exciting series of meetings that we're just embarking on. And just wanted to introduce our speaker to you. Barbara O'Neill is a health educator from Australia. She's a naturopath and a nutritionist. She's presented in a number of different countries around the world, and due to the wonder of modern technology, her lectures have been circulated around the globe also. Barbara's great passion is providing people with the information to help them care for their bodies in ways that enhance their body's ability to heal itself. So we're real excited that she's here. Now, if you'll just bow your heads with me, we'll ask God to bless our time together. Father in heaven, we're grateful to you for life. Our bodies are the temple of God that we're told. And tonight we're looking forward to finding ways that we can enhance our understanding of these tremendous bodies you've given us, and ways that we can facilitate enhancing our own health and understanding that that our bodies and our minds are very closely connected, and our mind is how we connect with you. So we're looking forward to this for health as well as spiritual reasons. We thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
So welcome. Ooh, I'm not used to being so loud. So it's good to see you all here tonight. And what I'd like to begin with is I'd like to look tonight at the true cause of disease. This is a perplexing question. And the two main theories in medicine today are the germ theory and the gene theory. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to look at what is the germ theory, and I'd like to look at what is the gene theory. And I'd like to have a look at, are they the causes of disease? And if they're not the cause of disease, what is their role in the human body? I'd like to begin by looking at the genes. And in 1953, it made headlines in the newspaper. It said, "Secret of life had been discovered." Two scientists, Watson and Crookes, had been able to unravel the DNA. Have you heard of the DNA? What is the DNA? I'm going to go here a few times this week. We're going to go to the CBD of the human body, which is the inside workings of the cell. The cell, because that's what we are. We are just a bunch of cells. We're eye cells, we're skin cells, we're tissue cells, we're bone cells, we're pancreatic cells. And so we're going to go here quite a bit because we're going to be looking at a whole lot of different body parts this week. But today I want to go right inside the very nucleus of the cell where the DNA is. The DNA is the genetic code inside every cell in the body, and it determines the colour of our hair, the colour of our skin, whether our hair is curly, whether our hair is straight. And we have 23 chromosomes from our mother and 23 chromosomes from our father. And the reason why the newspaper said Secret of Life had been discovered is because Watson and Crookes, they'd been able to unravel the DNA. So I've just unraveled the DNA and I've drawn a picture of it. And what's amazing is that when that DNA is pulled out, it can be 2 meters long. And the psalmist in Psalm 139 verse 14, the psalmist said, "I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvellous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well." And that psalmist didn't know what we're looking at tonight. A lot of information in the DNA. If you were to put all the information into alphabetical language and fill paperback books, they piled up on top of one another, they'd go to the moon and back a few times. I can hardly get my mind around that sort of information. Huge amount of information is curled up in the DNA. What's the DNA made up of? Well, the outside strands are made up of polysaccharides. Polysaccharides just means many sugars, and everything we eat is made up of many sugars. We call it tea, I think you call it supper, yeah, what we had tonight. All of that food was made up of many different sugars. That's what polysaccharides means. That's the outside strands. The middle bands is made up of amino acids. And amino acids is a breakdown from the protein that we eat. So as a plant-based diet person, my protein comes from legumes, beans, nuts and seeds. And what glues all this together is minerals. So minerals literally glues us together. So the minerals in what we had tonight were particularly the dark green leafy vegetables. Hippocrates said, let food be your medicine and medicine be your food, and he didn't know what we're looking at here. Our DNA is literally made up of the food that we're eating. Now, because nothing I do will change the fact that I'm 5'2", I have brown hair, I have white skin. In fact, someone called it recently milky skin. And I've even been in Mexico for 2 weeks and got a bit of a tan, but I still... Nothing I do can change that. My father died at 92 2 years ago, and he didn't have much grey hair. And my mother died at 51, and she didn't have much grey hair. So yeah, I'm in my late 60s and haven't got much grey hair. It's in the genes. But my husband's white. And his mother was white at 50, and his father was white at 50. And when people see a photo of him, they say, oh, your husband's blonde. And I smile because he used to have black hair. So these are all illustrations of these 23 chromosomes we get from our mother, 23 chromosomes from our father. Now, nothing I do can change this. So it seems like a tiny little step to say, my mother died at 51, a cripple in a wheelchair with rheumatoid arthritis, and so will I. But you've probably noticed I'm not a cripple in a wheelchair, and I'm not dead, and I'm way past 51. That's because genetics may load the gun, but it is lifestyle that pulls the trigger. Praise God for that. So we are not locked in to our genes. And I heard a very sad story, I think it was about 8 years ago, a famous actress, Angelina Jolie, and she found out that she had the gene. Her mother died from ovarian cancer, so she had both of her breasts removed. No need. And I did hear that a whole lot of ladies decided to follow suit. No need. I had one lady come to me, they picked up breast cancer, so she had both her breasts removed. Now she came to our retreat 10 years later, and she had new breasts, and she had breast cancer in the new ones. She thought she would take them both off so she wouldn't get breast cancer. No, genetics may load the gun, but it is lifestyle that pulls the trigger. Praise God for that. My mother didn't realise that the things she was eating, the white bread and the cups of tea many times a day and the headache powders she used to pop just about every day, and the meat, the high acid food she was eating, she didn't know that that was basically feeding her arthritis. I thank God that I know what feeds arthritis, and that's why very happily I can share with you the things that can contribute to disease and the things that can contribute to conquering disease. So genetics don't cause disease. In fact, one writer, several writers I've read about, say it only takes up about 10%. I find in many cases of sickness, there's a whole lot of little threads coming together. And one of the threads might be genetics. The study is an interesting study. It's called Epigenetics, the effect of our lifestyle on our genes. In other words, you can turn those genes on or off by the conditions you give your body, not just the food you're eating, but what time you go to bed, your exercise, how much water you drink, etc., etc. We're constantly being remade. We're being remade according to the pattern, according to the formula, according to the DNA. And so if we're constantly being remade, let me give you a little bit of an idea. New eye cells every 1 to 2 days, new cells that line our gut every 3 to 5 days. Tomorrow we're going to go on a journey through the gut. We're going to start at the mouth and end up at the other end. It's an interesting journey. And those cells are remade every 3 to 5 days. New skin every month. Liver, I think every 6 weeks. New bones every 3 months. We're constantly being remade according to the formula, according to the pattern. Well, if that is true, why aren't people well? Why don't people get well in that amount of time? And we should ever be asking that question, why? Newton's third law of motion states that to every action there is an equal and an opposite reaction. There is always a reason, and I'd like to explore that. Rudyard Kipling, he wrote a whole poem on it. Here's the first stanza. He said, I have 6 trusty serving men. They taught me all I know. Their names are what, why, when, where, how, and who. Do you take them everywhere you go? And if your specialist gets irritated at your questions, rise, politely excuse yourself, and find someone who'll answer your questions. Because this is your body, and you need to know. In Proverbs 26, verse 2, it states that the curse causeless shall not come. In other words, no problem happens without a cause. So why aren't people getting better? Because the DNA is damaged. And if the DNA is damaged, then the new cells cannot be made right. So why would the DNA be damaged? Let's pursue that. What causes damage in the DNA? There's a very interesting book. It's one of the most interesting books I've read. It's called The Calcium Lie by Dr. Robert Thompson. And he shows in that book that our food today has about half the nutrients it had in it 50 years ago. You see, the research is showing that 92% of DNA damage is caused by a mineral deficiency. Now, when you understand that it is minerals that glue us together, when there is a mineral deficiency, the DNA is not going to be made right. So why would we have a mineral deficiency? Yes, the soils today have half the nutrients that they had 50 years ago. Why? Because of the way agriculture is done. Whenever a crop grows in the ground, once it's removed, another crop should not be grown until all the nutrients are replaced that crop took out. It took a lot of nutrients to make that tomato, to make that lettuce. So once that plant's come out, then the ground has to be fed, and ideally it's fed with composts. We're going to look at compost in a minute. That's why organically grown fruits and vegetables have a far higher nutrient content compared to conventionally grown vegetables. And if it's got the stamp certified organic, you can believe it, because the rules and regulations around growing organics are very, very strict. I'll just give you one illustration. One organic tomato has 9 times the iron content compared to a conventionally grown tomato. So it mightn't look perfect, might have a funny look about it, but you're getting 9 times the iron compared to a conventionally grown tomato. Yes, people that eat refined food, never eat fruits and vegetables, yes, they're going to be mineral deficient. But there's more. There's stimulants that can leach the minerals. What are the stimulants? Stimulants that leach minerals, refined sugar. There's several books out showing the dangers of refined sugar. One's by Dr. Yudkin. It's called Pure, White and Deadly. That's the name of his book. He wrote it 20 years ago and it wasn't very popular, but it's becoming popular now because people are becoming aware. I think there was a movie called The Sugar Movie. I actually didn't see it, but a few people told me about it. In Dr. Yudkin's book, he's got a chapter where he claims that sugar should be banned. It is so dangerous. It takes 1 metre of sugar cane to make 1 teaspoon of sugar. And I was reading that there are 10 teaspoons of sugar in a can of Coca-Cola. That means if you're going to drink a can of Coca-Cola, you've got to be prepared to eat 10 metres of sugar cane. Could you do that? Whew, it'd probably take a few months if your jaw didn't break. Have you ever eaten sugar cane? It takes a long time to eat it. So it's a highly toxic, addictive acid, is refined sugar. I'm not talking about maple syrup. I'm not talking about honey. I'm talking about refined sugar. Refined sugar is so toxic, and one writer said this, it leaves the body better dressed than when it went in. When it went in, it was totally naked. No nutrients at all. When it came out, it's dressed with your minerals to try and calm it down so it doesn't totally poison you. Especially magnesium and calcium, 2 very important minerals for the bones and 2 very important minerals for heart function. But not only that, refined sugar gets the blood sugar level up so high, so quick, so fast, insulin has to be released. And then the blood sugar goes down too low. And then the person has a bit more sugar to get it up again, and then you see this whiplash. And that wears the pancreas out. So we're getting children born today with weakened pancreatic genes because of their parents' sugar habits. So not only does refined sugar leach minerals, refined sugar has the ability to damage the DNA. What else leaches minerals is caffeine. Caffeine causes a disruption in the neurotransmitters in the brain. So you can have a couple that are having, say, a cup of coffee a day, a bit of chocolate, maybe Coke. They can give birth to a baby that has a tendency to hyperactivity, also attention deficit syndrome, even autism, because of the weakened gene to the neurotransmitters in the brain because of the parents' caffeine habits. One writer claimed that parents are the genetic engineers of their children. That's a little scary, isn't it? But the good news is if you've done everything wrong and you start to hear about how to do everything right, the body responds very quickly. So caffeine not only can cause damage in the DNA, caffeine also is a mineral leacher. Again, calcium and magnesium. More stimulants that have the ability to leach minerals is alcohol. Children are being born today with fetal alcohol syndrome, to parents that have 2 drinks a week. Alcohol is a toxic poison. Even the Australian Health Department has stated that there's no safe dose of alcohol. That's quite something, isn't it? Also tobacco. Tobacco has 4,000 chemicals in it today. So that also brings us to chemicals. Chemicals have the ability to damage the DNA. You might be familiar with the Thalidomide Tragedy. This was in the 50s. Women were given thalidomide if they had morning sickness. And babies were being born without arms. Sadly, it was quite a while before they put 2 and 2 together. I talked to a German midwife. She came to our retreat. She was in her 80s, but she was a midwife in Germany, and it was a German drug, thalidomide. She said, I can remember delivering the first thalidomide baby. Wow, we need to remember these things because the biggest chemical company in the world is the pharmaceutical company. Drugs are chemicals. But back to the chemicals, be careful what's in your home. Be careful what you're washing your clothes with, what you're brushing your teeth with, washing your hair with. Be careful on the food that you're buying. Be careful on what you're washing your dishes in, what you're cleaning your bathroom in, We've had some very sick people come to our retreat who are cleaners because they use so many chemicals. We've got to get the chemicals out of our homes, out of all our products. But back to drugs. Drugs never cure disease. They just change the form and location of disease. I was at a health retreat in Alabama a few weeks ago, and a man was telling me that he had kidney failure, and he'd been on a blood pressure medication for about 20 years. So I had a look at the side effect of the blood pressure medication. Guess what the major side effect was? Kidney failure. I said, have a look at this. It's easy to Google. Anyone who's on medication, you need to Google it. You need to have a look at the side effects. And no, I'm not telling you to stop your medication straight away. Some medication can be stopped straight away, and we're going to look at it a little bit as we go through the week. Some medication, you can't stop it straight away. You've got to implement the lifestyle changes and the herbs to strengthen and ease off it. Well, when this man saw that, he stopped straight away. Now, when the saying drugs never cure disease, we're not talking about a crisis. In a crisis, a drug can save a life. We're not talking about that. And he said, if I was in a car accident and had my leg put back together, I'd be very thankful for general anaesthetic. Now, there is a time, but when the writer says drugs never cure disease, we're talking about disease here. And this week we're going to show you a lot of different diseases, and we're going to show you alternatives or options. A lot of people unaware of what they can do. The pharmaceutical company is the wealthiest company in the world today. Their profits go into billions, and whoa, they're making a lot of money out of this vaccine. They're about the only one that are. Because when you see free vaccine, you know what you've got to ask yourself? Who's paying for it? And you know who is, our taxes. So we're looking at what causes damage to the DNA. Monosodium glutamate. Monosodium glutamate is an excitotoxin. It excites the nerve cells on the tongue, so the food tastes fantastic. You know what that means? Rotten food would taste good. That's a bit scary, isn't it? But be careful. They've given it different names now. Natural flavour enhancer. That almost sounds healthy, doesn't it? It's MSG. So it's important to use good quality fruits and vegetables, organic. Taste an organic tomato compared to a conventional tomato. There's no difference. When you buy good quality fruit and vegetables, you don't need to use much flavourings. Use good quality oils, very good quality salts, whole salts, fresh herbs, and there is no need to resort to monosodium glutamate. Basically, you can consider that it is a chemical, genetically modified foods. President Vladimir Putin, he's passed a law that any Russian who grows or sells genetically modified food is to be considered a terrorist. Wow. Do we ever think that we'd be behind Russia? Russia banned microwaves in 1976. We're a bit behind the ball there, hey? So that brings us to electromagnetic field excess. We are electrical people. There's a spark of electricity in every cell, and the electromagnetic field coming off our bodies is not the same as in the devices. So be careful of your exposure to the devices. I was reading the report of a breast surgeon. He said, I'm shocked at the amount of young women who are getting breast cancer in the breast where they put the bra in the phone. Sorry, the phone in the bra in that breast. You can even buy a sports bra now with a pocket in it. So that electromagnetic field interferes with the electromagnetic field in our body. Now you probably know, I hope you know, that the worst place to put your laptop is on your lap. Protect the family jewels. We're getting young men with low sperm count, inability to hold an erection because of the years and years of laptop on their laps. Also, the reports are showing that girls who have the laptop on their lap in their adolescent teen years, they're now in their late 20s, and 47% miscarriage in the girls that had the laptop on their lap in their developing years. So please, put it on the bench, put it on a table, even on the arm of a chair, but don't try not to have it near your body. I wonder how many people are going to start having hip replacements who have that phone in their hip pocket. Yes, it's all right, guys, to have a man bag too, is that right? Put it in. My brother-in-law carries his hat round with the phone in his hat. But as much as possible, get it away from your body. And 80% of Americans sleep with their phones, and the pillow is no protection. We should sleep in an electromagnetic field free zone. So no technology in the bedroom. Charge your phones, your iPads, your computers in the next room. And please, adults, have some rules in the home for children. You can take up the Russian guidelines. Let me give you the Russian guidelines for children's exposure to technology. So under the age of 2, 0. Under the age of 5, 5 minutes a day. Under the age of 10, I think it's 20 minutes a day. So 15 and under, we're probably starting to look at an hour a day. Up to the age of 18, maybe 3 hours exposure a day. Got that? The Russians want to protect their children. And I'm sure we just as much. So please, adults, have some rules in the home. It is a good idea to have the Wi-Fi off if possible at night. And it's also a great idea that every bedroom be an electromagnetic field free zone. And if someone says, yeah, but I'm on call, I say, well, put the phone in the hall. You'll wake. These all have the ability to tamper with our DNA, I think in ways that maybe only we'll know in those heavenly courts when we're looking at the assessment of what happened to planet Earth. Also mould. Now as we look at mould, we come over to microorganisms. As the name implies, microorganisms are microscopic and they're living things. There's the organism. And mould is one of many microorganisms. But let me show you where mould sits in the area of microorganisms. Microorganisms are everywhere. They're everywhere. They're sitting on here, they're sitting on my skin. There's 10 times more microorganisms in the body than cells, the National Geographic declared in a science article I was reading. And there are 10 times more microorganisms in our gut. Tomorrow we're going to have a look at their role there in more detail. They're everywhere. And whenever cell damage happens, these microorganisms have the ability to change roles. So let's have a look at that. A microbiologist said to me, he said, we call them garbage collectors. That's what these microorganisms are called when they change roles. They become the garbage collectors. And their name is bacteria. That's what bacteria is. That's what it does. It has a role to play. Whenever cell damage happens, the microorganisms have the ability to change roles and become the clean-up team. As the environment changes, they change. They now become the exterminators. And what's the exterminator's name? Their names are yeast, fungus, virus. As the environment changes, they now become the undertakers. What do undertakers do? They take away dead things. So the next one, after this one, the undertaker stage is mould. It's not long after the mould stage that the matter is brought back to dust. And what does the preacher say at the funeral? Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. What's he referring to? He's referring to what's about to happen in the coffin. The matter is about to be brought back to dust. Now, what I have drawn for you here is the carbon cycle, or often called the cycle of life. And the basic law of science states nothing's created and nothing's destroyed. It just changes form. So let me give you some illustrations. We've got an apple tree, and this would be happening in Australia because we've just gone into spring. And the little flowers are all developing on the apple tree under the action of microorganisms. The apple develops under the action of microorganisms, but the apple's not ready to eat. It has to ripen. And I was reading that the colour of the apple tells us, doesn't it? When the redness comes, then it's ready to eat. What ripens it? The same microorganisms. No one eats the apple. So what happens to the apple now? It rots under the action of the same microorganism. This is a sealed unit. So this is all, there's nothing from outside coming in. It's a sealed unit. What about mother hen sitting on eggs? Now I was giving some Australian education to the children I'm staying with, that in Australia we call hens and roosters chooks. Have you heard that? We call the babies chickens, whereas I think you call them all chickens, don't you? So in Australia you can be driving along the road and there's a takeaway shop and it'll say barbecue chook. That's what they say. So we've got mother hen, she's a chook, and she's sitting on 10 eggs. I come along, I pick up one egg, I shake it violently and I put it back under mother hen. And I come back 2 weeks later and I hear chirp, chirp, chirp. I see little chickens breaking out of their egg. What happened to the egg I shook? Have you seen what mother hen will do? She will boot it out of the nest because there's a bad smell coming out of it. What did I do when I shook it? I caused massive cell damage. And the microorganisms that were about to cause the development of a little chicken had to take their suit of clothes off, so to speak, put their rubber gloves and apron on, and become the garbage collectors, the clean-up team. As the environment changed, the exterminators. As the environment changed, the undertakers. And I think we can all appreciate, and we've all experienced this, there's a bad smell coming off. In fact, what comes off is quite toxic. And when mother hen smells that, she boots it out of the nest. Now, I don't want to go anywhere near that egg now, do I? It's going to smell really, really bad. Now, notice that nothing went into the egg. The egg is a sealed unit. It's all happening in there. And when Florence Nightingale, very famous nurse, you've heard of Florence Nightingale, in 1854 she was asked to go to Scutari. Let me draw it for you. Here's the Black Sea. The Crimean War was happening. And the Crimean War, the British and the French were fighting the Russians. And the British troops, when they got wounded, they were put in boats, sailed down the Black Sea to Scutari. Scutari was the port where basically a makeshift hospital had been set up. It was ex-army Turkish barracks. A war correspondent went to report on the war. When he came back, he wrote an article. He said, "Did we raise our young men to rot in this filthy hospital?" The men were dying like flies in that hospital. They had a better chance on the battlefront. So Florence Nightingale and 35 nurses were sent to Scutari to see what they could do. There was raw sewage in the corridors. She found a man who was still in the battle clothes 2 weeks after he'd been admitted. The doctors were not washing their hands between operations. I'm shocked that the death rate wasn't 80%. So Florence Nightingale, as soon as she saw it, she quickly telegrammed the British government. She said, "You need to send a sanitary commission, a team here to assess this." because the doctors told Florence and her nurses, this is men's business, you can't come in. So she needed some authority there. Eventually they let her in because another shipload of 1,200 wounded men came, so they let her and her nurses in. First thing she did was start to clean house. She got some men to assess the plumbing situation, but the Sanitary Commission, this is what they found. Here's the hospital. It was built in a swamp, and there was a dead horse in the swamp. In case you don't know it, that is a horse. And there was a dead dog, and the men were drinking the water out of that swamp. So very quickly the Sanitary Commission started to drain and fix things up. Within 2 months, the death rate went from 50% to 2%. When Florence came back to London, Prince Albert and Queen Victoria were there to meet her. There was a big welcoming party hailing her as a heroine. When she saw that, she changed her name to Mary Smith, went down the back gangplank and went home. They said to her later, why did you do that? She said, I'm not a heroine. All I did was increase hygiene, sanitation and nutrition. Did everyone hear that? We cannot forget this because this is 80 years before the discovery of antibiotics. She said, all I did was increase hygiene. What's hygiene? That's personal hygiene. Wash the body, wash the wounds, clean clothes. Sanitation, keep the house clean. She said because the plumbing wasn't working, 30 men were going to one chamber pot. I don't know how they could even breathe in that place. And their food was big pots of water with bits of rotten meat in it. You cannot heal without nutrition. She said, all I did was increase hygiene, sanitation and nutrition. This is why there aren't any childhood infectious diseases happening today. It's because of Florence Nightingale. Huge reforms in the hospitals. She did a similar thing in India. Huge reforms. And when she read of Louis Pasteur's theory that germs cause disease, she said, this is the theory of a man of a very unstable mind. And anyone who believes it is equally unstable. Now, about the same time as Antoine, as Louis Pasteur, there was a Professor Antoine Bouchon. Now, Professor Antoine Bouchon, most people have never heard of him. This is how you spell his name. My book, Self-Heal by Design, will tell you a little bit about him. He was a 6 times professor, but most people have never heard of him because they did not like his theory. You know what he said? Germs don't cause disease, they're the result of unhealthful conditions. He said disease is born in us and of us. Well, no one liked that. You know what they liked? It's not me, it's that germ that jumped on me and made me sick. Yes, there are microorganisms around, but they're opportunist organisms. They have a role. These are the performers in the cycle of life. These are the players in the cycle of life. They're not the enemy. God created them for a purpose. And if they're out of control, what we've got to find out is why. Oh, I forgot to empty the garbage bin. I'm at my daughter's place and my grandson's flicking all of these little fruit flies. And I said, you got to find out why they're there. Don't keep killing the fruit flies. Down the bottom of the bananas there was a rotten banana. We take the rotten banana out, guess what? No more fruit flies. You got to find out the cause. It should be on the tip of our lips. Why? Why are these things so? There is always a reason. So when Florence Nightingale said, the theory that germs cause disease is the theory of a man of a very unstable mind. What I have presented to you here is pleomorphism. These microbes change according to the environment. So do I. We all do. I'm not dressed now the way I was dressed in Mexico. I'm not dressed now the way I was dressed in bed last night. I'm not dressed now the way I was dressed as I was running up and down your streets early this morning with frost on the ground. It was very nice there. It was so lovely. We change roles according to the environment. So do the microbes. And have you noticed with COVID, a virus, that 99% of people who get it recover? Have you noticed? They're the current figures. I'm just quoting the current figures. And have you noticed the ones that do go down are the ones that have pre-existing health conditions? So if they died 2 years ago, it would have been called the flu. But no one dies of the flu today, have you noticed? It's all given the name COVID. Of course, a death is always sad. Never do I want to make light of that. But my daughter lives in Wisconsin, and there's a lot of Amish around. She knows them well. A very sad story of her friend's young boy drowned in a flooded creek. His clothes got caught on a log. The ambulance came. He was already gone. On the death certificate, it said, died from COVID. And the parents were angry. They said, our son died from drowning. Why did you do that? They said, well, we tested him and he was positive. Are they testing Godivas? What's a Godiva? That doesn't make any sense. Do you know it is our God-given right that we choose what goes into our body? And anything that goes in, we need to seriously investigate what its nature is. We don't need to fear the vice. You know what the Bible says, that God says? He says in 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, he says, I've not given you the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. You know what a sound mind does? It assesses this. Because this makes sense. It makes sense. And on his deathbed, Louis Pasteur said, Bernard was right. Bernard was another contemporary at the same time as Pasteur and Bouchon, and believed, as Bouchon did, that germs don't cause disease, they're the result of unhealthful conditions. So Louis Pasteur said on his deathbed, Bernard was right, the microbe is nothing, the organism is everything. It's the condition of the body. It's not the microbes, because they're everywhere. And if we all hand sanitize and wipe everything over, guess what? They're still there. Because you know what they do? They adapt and adjust. These are the superbugs. Why have the superbugs appeared? Because of this. It's called antibiotic. I'm not against antibiotics. They save lives. But the human body should only have about 2 courses in a lifetime. Did you hear that? And when someone comes to me and says, I've been on antibiotics for 7 years, it hurts me to hear that. Where did antibiotics come from? Alexander Fleming, 1929, he's growing bacteria in flasks in his laboratory. He comes in one morning and they're all dead. So he began to investigate. Why? Why is his bacteria dead? Nothing in the laboratory could have done it. There's an open window and there's sun rays coming in and there's a dust, and the dust is just falling and settling on his bacteria. He investigated on the next story, open window, plate of fruit, mouldy orange. Do you remember the story from school days? The mouldy orange is giving off a dust. In that dust is its spore, but in that dust is a highly toxic gas designed to kill off anything that would compete with the mould's food source. It's as if the mould says, this is my orange, no one else is going to get it. Going to get off a toxic gas. It killed the bacteria. So Alexander Fleming, he called the mould penicillium. He called the mould waste, which is far more toxic than the mould, he called the mould waste penicillic acid, and that's the penicillin that we know today. I believe that the penicillin should be kept for life-saving. The World Health Organization, they have a plaque in every doctor's surgery, or they should. In Australia, I've seen it. It says the World Health Organisation's biggest health hazard or scare risk today is overuse of antibiotics. Because what happens is someone gets seriously ill and the antibiotics aren't working. And superbugs. What are superbugs? Superbugs happen when the antibiotics are continually thrown at this, and a lot of it die, but some of them adapt and adjust and become stronger. We need to look at the fact that the human body was designed to heal itself, and it'll heal itself if you give it the right conditions. If the body was designed to heal itself, doesn't that make the most sense? Let's find out how it heals and work with it. My daughter lives in Wisconsin. Her eldest son is 22 and he's a paramedic. He got COVID. Brought COVID home to the whole household. My daughter has 7 children. And her husband he's not in the best of health. He unfortunately likes a bit of junk food. He's a bit overweight and he has medication, and they all got COVID. Well, my daughter has a little steam sauna hut. She paid $16,000 for it, and it took her 5 years to pay off, but she said it's the best money I've ever spent. So she lights the fire up, and she got everyone in the steam sauna out into the big cold dunk pool. It's about this big and about this tall, and then back into the sauna. Two a day they had, and in 3 days they were all well. And this was a good illustration because my daughter's healthy and her kids are, they eat well, but my son-in-law, he works very hard, long hours, and just really grabs the fast foods. He recovered as well. Now, he was a candidate for going down, is that right? And they got God's antibiotic. It's called garlic. You've heard of it? But if you want to use it as an antibiotic, you've got to have 4 raw cloves a day. You've got to hit it hard. When an antibiotic goes into the body, it's got a kill mentality. So it will kill some of your good bacteria as well. That's why so many people that have an antibiotic develop thrush. Because what are you putting into your body? A mold waste. Now, absolutely, in a crisis, it can save a life. But most people should go through their whole life never having one. My daughter, at the age of, I think she was 25 when she had her second baby, she got an infection in her uterus. And so she had to have an antibiotic drip. And all the nurses came in to look at this 25-year-old girl that had never had an antibiotic. They'd never heard of such a thing. Because I raised 7 children without antibiotics, actually 8 children, and they're all still alive. They all survived. Because there's lots of little things that you can do. In Psalm 104, verse 14, the Bible says that God gave herbs for the service of man. There are some amazing herbs that can work with your body to bring about a healing condition. But we'll look at this a bit more tomorrow night. Antoine Bouchon took a dead cat one day and he put it in an airtight container. And 4 months later he opened the container, dust. What brought the cat back to dust? Because I'll give you an Australian illustration. In the Australian bush, if a cat dies, then the kookaburra, you've heard of the kookaburra? And the crow have a nibble, the dingo might have a nibble, the blowfly lays its maggots, they have a nibble, the dung beetles and the worms come up. They're all scavengers, all designed to bring matter back to dust. But Antoine Bouchon had an airtight container. No dung beetle, no kookaburra, no dingo had a nibble. What brought matter back to dust? It's the microorganisms that were an integral part of living, running cat. Upon death of the organism, which is the ultimate cell damage, the suit of clothes was taken off and the rubber gloves were put on. And these microorganisms did what God designed them to do, bring matter back to dust. With great excitement, Antoine Bouchon got the dust, put it under his microscope. It was alive with microorganisms. Remember the basic law of science? Nothing's created, nothing's destroyed. Isn't this why we have compost bins? So just before I left Australia in early April, so March, I was busy in the garden preparing the beds for the winter vegetables and making sure all my celery plants were well fed with compost. So when I put compost in my garden, I'm putting microorganisms in my garden, because it was the microorganisms that brought all the vegetable scraps and all the weeds back to dust. And I know when it's ready because you smell it. It smells like earth. So what am I putting in my garden when I put compost in? Microorganisms. Now they play another role. They are responsible for the breakdown of the minerals in the soil. They are responsible for the absorption of the minerals into the roots of the plant. They protect the plant from harmful pathogens that might be in the soil, and they nourish the plant. Now the plant knows that it needs them, and so 50% of the fuel that it makes from photosynthesis, it sends back down to feed the microorganisms. The law of service is written on every plant in nature. You notice that with the plants? Everything the plant does is to produce, to give. Lining our gastrointestinal tract is something that looks very much like the roots of the plant. Lining our gastrointestinal tract, and we're going to look at this tomorrow night, are villi. And the villi are lined with a thick flora that is made up of Lactobacillus acidophilus bifidus bacterium, which is, yes, I'm speaking English, our healthy or our friendly bacteria. And that bacteria play the same role. They are responsible for the final breakdown. They are responsible for the absorption of the nutrients out of our gut and into the blood. They protect the blood against any harmful pathogens that might be in the gut. They nourish the little cells that line the gastrointestinal tract. Are you starting to see that they're not the enemy? They're an integral part of life on planet Earth, just doing what God planned them to do. So I trust you see in my illustrations tonight that genetics don't cause disease. Genetics may load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. Germs don't cause disease. They have specific roles on the planet. And if they are out of control, we need to find out why. It's like the lady, she's filmed me a few times in Alabama, and the last time I saw her, she's scratching. I said, "What's happening with you?" She said, "Let me show you some pictures." She showed me some photos. Her face was swollen, she had big welts all over. I said, "What happened?" She said, "I was getting sicker and sicker, couldn't go to work. I'm lying in bed." And I'm lying in bed one day in my trailer, and I noticed that there was something growing on the wall. It was black mold. And between her bedroom, there was a wall to the bathroom, and there was a leaking tap. What was poisoning her? It was breathing in this mold waste. Whew. We've got to find out why. There is always a reason. It can take hardly any time to get in, but sometimes it can take a while to get out. My book, Self-Healed by Design, explores what I've shown you tonight in more detail, and also shows you programs where you can implement to little by little get the right balance back into the body and eliminate, if necessary, any yeasts or molds that might be in the body. We're going to have a break now. It is 7 o'clock. So we'll come back in 10 minutes, and when we come back in 10 minutes, we're going to look at your liver. And your liver lives under your right rib, Remember it? Cells are remade every 6 weeks. And we're going to have a look at the role that your liver plays in the proper running of the human body. So please have a breath of fresh air, and we'll be back in 10 minutes.